Sergeant Carter stepped onto the dusty parade grounds of Fort Carson, Colorado, her boots clicking rhythmically against the concrete as she carried nothing but a standard-issue pack, a helmet, and a quiet determination that few could see. At 23, she was young for her rank, with a slight frame and sharp green eyes that constantly scanned her surroundings. Her hair was pulled back in a tight braid, no nonsense and practical, which contrasted sharply with the jokes and whispers of the older soldiers already gathered. To them, she looked like just another rookie, small, inexperienced, soft. She had heard the snickers and comments the moment she arrived. Looks like someone brought a doll to a gunfight. Ignored them, keeping her focus on her training. She had spent years preparing for this moment, not just physically but mentally. She wasn't just any soldier. She had gone through the grueling medical and combat training programs, excelling in field medicine, tactical awareness, and survival strategies. Yet she knew experience sometimes outweighed skill in the eyes of the hardened veterans she was about to join. She braced herself for the challenge of proving herself, knowing that her abilities would have to speak louder than words. The squad she was joining was a tight-knit group of infantrymen, seasoned soldiers who had seen deployments overseas and survived situations most rookies could only read about. Their leader, Staff Sergeant Brandon, was a grizzled man in his late 30s, decorated, confident, and notoriously skeptical of new arrivals. Had heard the rumors. Most rookies lasted a month at most before quitting or being reassigned. This squad didn't take new members lightly and was about to become their test case. Her first day was a blur of introductions and inspections. The squad stared at her with a mix of curiosity and subtle disdain. A few soldiers, like Private First Class, whispered jokes she could hear clearly, but she refused to react. Had learned early in life that controlling her emotions was essential. She kept her head down, listened carefully, and absorbed every bit of information the older soldiers gave, from navigation tips to combat anecdotes. She even anticipated certain moves and strategies during drills, silently nodding where she could improve her own instincts. Despite their initial doubts, noticed small opportunities to prove herself. During a live-fire training exercise in the field, she stayed alert and cautious while the others moved aggressively, sometimes recklessly. A misstep by one of the veterans could have ended badly, but quick thinking helped prevent an accident. She offered medical assistance for minor injuries during training, earning cautious nods from soldiers who previously ignored her. Still, her competence was met with polite skepticism. "She's lucky," muttered one evening. "This is nothing compared to real combat." Even her attempts to engage with the squad socially were met with resistance. At the mess hall, soldiers sat in tight clusters, sharing stories of past missions and laughing at each other's mistakes. Joined in lightly, asking questions, offering observations about teamwork and sharing a few dry jokes. Some smiled politely, others merely shrugged. It was clear that acceptance wouldn't come easily. But didn't need instant friendship, she needed trust, and she was willing to earn it silently and steadily, day by day. In the evenings, after exhausting drills and long marches, found herself alone in her small barracks room, reviewing maps and medical manuals. She memorized the terrain of the surrounding training grounds, noting dangerous areas, emergency exits, and potential hazards. She rehearsed field triage protocols, imagined scenarios where soldiers could be injured or trapped, and devised solutions for each situation. She visualized herself in command, despite the fact that her rank didn't grant her authority over the older, more experienced men. These quiet hours were where her preparation truly took root, building the foundation for the moment she would inevitably have to step forward. Her perseverance didn't go entirely unnoticed. Lieutenant, a visiting officer who observed training exercises, remarked to during a review, "She's got instincts most rookies lack. Watch her. She might surprise you," grunted, unconvinced. "Maybe, but instincts don't matter if she freezes when the real danger comes." That doubt was exactly the kind wanted to overcome. She wasn't just determined to survive the skepticism. She was determined to prove that competence, courage, and calm thinking were just as valuable as experience and size. The turning point came during a navigation drill in the foothills outside Fort Carson. The squad was tasked with a night exercise involving simulated enemy encounters and injuries. Quietly took note of the squad's formation, noting weaknesses in coverage and how a single misstep could compromise safety. As expected, a minor miscommunication led to two soldiers wandering off course, nearly falling into a steep ravine. Acted immediately, guiding them back with precision and authority, using both her voice and hand signals. The soldiers were startled by her confidence, a mix of relief and disbelief washing over them. By the end of that day, a subtle shift had begun. While the squad still whispered and joked, there was an unspoken acknowledgement of skill. She didn't boast or demand recognition, her actions spoke for her. The veterans noticed how she remained calm under stress, how she thought ahead, how she anticipated danger before it struck. They couldn't deny her ability, even if they weren't ready to admit it openly. His presence was no longer just a curiosity. She was becoming a quietly formidable member of the team, someone whose capabilities could tip the balance between success and disaster. Yet knew the real test was yet to come. All her preparation, all her silent endurance had been leading to the first major field exercise. The squad would face simulated, but dangerously realistic hazards, unstable terrain, unpredictable weather, and unexpected challenges designed to test teamwork and survival. Sensed the tension in the air, the anticipation of something beyond ordinary drills. She also knew that when the real danger arrived, no amount of skepticism or teasing would matter. It would be a matter of life, death, and quick thinking. As night fell, sat outside her barracks looking at the distant mountains bathed in moonlight. The wind carried the scent of pine and rain, whispering a promise of both danger and opportunity. She clenched her fists and whispered to herself, "Let them doubt me. They'll see soon enough." Beneath her calm exterior burned an unshakable resolve. She wasn't just here to prove herself to the squad. She was here to prove that courage, intelligence, and preparation could make a difference when it mattered most. And so the stage was set. Carter, the underestimated rookie, was about to enter a world where the true measure of a soldier was not size, not experience, but heart, wit, and the courage to act when no one else would. In the shadows of the Colorado mountains, where storms and dangers waited silently, she would soon face the challenge that would define her, and unknowingly, the entire squad she was determined to protect. The morning sun rose over the jagged peaks surrounding Fort Carson, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. Sergeant Carter tightened the straps on her pack, checked her medical kit, and adjusted her rifle sling. The squad gathered near the transport vehicles, all seasoned soldiers with hardened faces and weathered hands, prepared for what was supposed to be a routine multi-day field exercise. Today, they would navigate the treacherous foothills, practice tactical maneuvers, and simulate combat conditions. The mountains seemed beautiful yet unforgiving, a silent warning of what was to come. The squad's leader, Staff Sergeant Brandon, called them together. "This is a training exercise," he barked. "We move as a unit, cover each other, and don't get sloppy. Remember, it's just terrain and simulated enemies, but I expect discipline." His tone left no room for argument, and the squad responded with crisp acknowledgement. His heart raced, not with fear, but anticipation. She had anticipated the hazards of this terrain, studied the maps, and memorized every potential escape route, every ridge, every canyon. Still, she knew that no amount of preparation could entirely account for nature's unpredictability. The squad set off on foot, moving in tight formation. The wind was brisk, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, and noticed clouds gathering along the peaks. The others seemed oblivious to the weather, focused instead on speed and efficiency. They joked, sparred lightly, and carried on with confidence, some even teasing about overthinking everything. She smiled politely, but inwardly reminded herself that observation was often more valuable than bravado. By midday, the mountains began to show their temper. A sudden gust of wind sent loose gravel skidding down the slopes, forcing the soldiers to steady themselves. The temperature dropped abruptly and the sky darkened with heavy, low-hanging clouds. Noticed a small warning sign in the distance, a rock face that had shifted recently, its surface slick from the early rains. She pointed it out too, suggesting a safer route. "It's nothing," he replied dismissively, waving her off. "We've handled worse." Nodded, keeping her observation in mind, fully aware that the mountain didn't negotiate. The squad pressed deeper into the foothills. Visibility dropped as the storm moved in, clouds swirling like gray smoke around the peaks. Instincts screamed caution but continued pushing the squad forward. As they traversed a narrow ridge, she noticed a loose boulder teetering precariously. She warned the soldier closest to it to step aside, and the boulder fell harmlessly down the slope. A few soldiers exchanged glances, realizing its attention to detail wasn't trivial. Still, the majority shrugged it off, laughing nervously. Soon, the terrain became more challenging. Muddy streams cut across their path, forcing them to navigate slippery rocks, fallen logs, and hidden holes. Compasses spun unpredictably, and radios began to crackle with interference. Pulled out a map, cross-referencing with landmarks and taking careful note of their current position. She suggested an alternate path, explaining it would reduce the risk of injury. Again waved her off, unwilling to admit her suggestion had merit. The tension between caution and hubris began building subtly but unmistakably. By late afternoon, small incidents began to add up. Private First Class twisted his ankle on a hidden route, and another soldier slipped, cutting his arm on a jagged rock. Jumped into action, cleaning and bandaging wounds, stabilizing injured limbs, and keeping morale intact. She moved with efficiency and calm, her voice steady, her instructions precise. The soldiers who had mocked her began watching her in awe, though some were still reluctant to fully trust her. She didn't need their approval, only the focus on survival. As the storm intensified, the squad faced a critical challenge. Rain began pounding down in sheets, turning the narrow paths into slick, treacherous slides. Visibility dropped to a few meters. The wind threatened to topple them at every step. Mind raced, calculating safe routes, noting the unstable slopes, and mentally mapping the fastest way to higher ground. She warned the squad again, her voice sharp but controlled. "We need to take the north ridge. The south path will give way." Hesitated, glancing at the storm, but ultimately insisted, "We stay the course. We've got this." His pulse quickened, not from fear but from urgency. She scanned the terrain, noticing subtle changes. Rocks that had shifted, mudslides forming, trees bending under the wind's pressure. The mountain was testing them, probing for weakness. As training kicked in fully, her mind compartmentalized risk, survival priorities, and leadership strategy. If something went wrong, she would need to act faster than anyone else, take control, and save lives. Around late afternoon, the first signs of real danger arrived. A low rumble echoed through the valley, followed by a series of smaller rock slides. One soldier froze, terrified, as mud and stones tumbled dangerously close. Grabbed his arm, pulling him to safety. She barked orders, her voice slicing through the storm. "Stay low, keep moving, follow me." For the first time, her calm authority began overriding the squad's panic. Soldiers who had doubted her instinctively followed, drawn by her precision and confidence. Despite her warnings, the storm escalated faster than anticipated. The combination of rain, wind, and loose soil created deadly conditions. Realized that what had started as a routine exercise was becoming a life-threatening situation. The squad's cohesion, already fragile due to skepticism of her abilities, was now at risk. Panic threatened to take hold, and she understood instinctively that unless someone took charge immediately, chaos could lead to serious injury, or worse. Moved to the center of the group, positioning herself where she could observe everyone. She began issuing precise, actionable commands, slow steps over slick rocks, careful handholds on tree trunks, and constant awareness of slope stability. She checked every soldier's footing, monitored breathing, and reinforced focus. Her confidence and clarity began transforming the squad's fear into cautious determination. Even, wary, and stubborn, noticed that her directives were keeping them safe. By evening, the squad had navigated most of the most treacherous terrain, but knew the worst was yet to come. The mountain had only revealed the first hints of its danger. Loose rocks, unstable ridges, and the deepening storm signaled that the upcoming night could be catastrophic. Double-checked injuries, reinforced her instructions, and mentally prepared herself for the challenge ahead. She understood that soon, she might be the only one capable of keeping the squad alive. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the peaks in orange and violet, stood at the edge of a ridge, scanning the valley below. The wind howled, carrying rain and the scent of wet earth. Every instinct screamed that the mountain was ready to test them beyond training, and she felt a mix of fear and determination. The squad had survived the day thanks to her vigilance, but she knew the real danger was only beginning. And deep inside, she realized that the moment when no one would listen to her, or anyone else, was fast approaching. Clenched her fists inside her gloves, whispered to herself, "This is it, time to see who's ready and who is." The night ahead would challenge everything the squad thought they knew, push their limits, and reveal who could survive. Preparation, skill, and calm resolve would soon be tested in ways none of them could anticipate. The storm wasn't just weather, it was a warning. And Carter, the rookie no one took seriously, was ready. The storm hit with sudden, merciless force. Sheets of rain slammed against the soldiers, turning the narrow mountain paths into slick rivers of mud. Wind gusted violently, tearing at packs and helmets, rattling trees as if the mountains themselves were warning them to retreat. Carter's heart raced, but her mind remained razor-sharp. Every instinct she had honed through years of training kicked in as she scanned the treacherous terrain. She noticed subtle shifts in the soil, precarious rocks, and the faint rumble of something far more dangerous than wind. It began slowly. A few boulders dislodged from above, bouncing down the slope harmlessly at first, but then came a deep, ominous roar growing louder by the second. Froze, recognizing the sound instantly, a landslide. Her pulse spiked as she yelled, "Everyone get low, move toward the ridge, now." The soldiers reacted in panic, some slipping in the mud, others barely keeping their footing. Momentarily stunned by the roar, tried to take charge but was knocked sideways by a gust of wind. Realized immediately that he would be unable to lead them. Debris tore through the slope. Trees bent and snapped like twigs. Mud and rock cascaded toward the squad and screams filled the air. Private First Class, who had been joking earlier in the day, was knocked off his feet by a rolling boulder, landing hard against a jagged rock. Was at his side in an instant, checking his pulse, stabilizing his neck and shouting directions to the others. One by one, the soldiers were battered by falling debris, mud, and sheer panic. The situation escalated from dangerous to life-threatening within moments. Radios were smashed by falling rocks, leaving them cut off from the rest of the training unit. The squad leader lay unconscious, bleeding from a gash across his temple. Quickly scanned the scene, taking in the chaos. Broken limbs, soldiers trapped under debris, the relentless storm still pushing toward them. Time became critical. Every second counted, and every mistake could mean death. The soldiers, many of whom had once doubted her, looked too. Their fear was palpable, but their eyes sought guidance, clarity, leadership. She realized that she had become their only hope. His voice rang out, calm but commanding. "Hold your arm steady, keep pressure on that wound. Miller, help me free Private Jackson from that mud. Everyone else, move to higher ground now." Her words cut through the panic like a beacon. Soldiers who had laughed at her suggestions earlier now obeyed without hesitation. She worked with methodical precision, balancing triage, direction, and morale simultaneously. Improvised splints were made from broken branches. Helmets were used as shields from falling rocks, and coats were wrapped tightly to prevent hypothermia. As the storm raged on, spotted another immediate threat. A river of mud racing down the slope toward a cluster of injured soldiers. Without thinking, she ran, pushing one of them out of harm's way, barely avoiding being swept off her own feet. The sheer force of the mountain tested every ounce of her strength, every skill she had ever learned. She barked instructions, moved debris, and guided the squad to a safer section of the ridge. It was as if she had become the center of gravity in a world gone mad. Regained partial consciousness, struggling to his knees. glanced at him and barked, "Stay down, you can't move yet, you need to stabilize." He hesitated but recognized her authority in that moment. He was trained to lead, yet here in a crisis far beyond ordinary training, he deferred to the one person capable of keeping the squad alive. The soldiers were watching, learning quickly from her calm decisiveness. Didn't have time for pride, she only had time for action. Night fell quickly as the storm persisted, turning the terrain into a chaotic nightmare. Visibility dropped to mere feet. Rain pelted faces, and wind whipped clothes and gear with a force that made movement excruciating. The injured were shivering, some going into shock, and realized that staying stationary was as dangerous as moving. She organized the soldiers into small groups, each responsible for helping the other, but all under her direct supervision. She communicated clear, concise instructions, making sure no one wandered, no one panicked, no one slipped into despair. Noticed the first signs of hypothermia in one of the younger privates, a rapid, shallow breath, trembling uncontrollably in confusion. She knelt beside him, wrapping him in layers of coats, pressing him against her body for warmth and speaking in calm, reassuring tones. "You're okay. We're moving, just stay with me." The boy's eyes, wide with fear, met hers and he nodded, finding strength in her presence. Realized then that leadership wasn't just about giving orders. It was about instilling hope when hope seemed impossible. As she moved from soldier to soldier, kept one eye on the mountain above. The unstable rock face groaned ominously, a reminder that danger could strike at any moment. She directed the group toward a safer section of the ridge she had scouted earlier, improvising paths through mud, boulders, and fallen trees. Every step was a calculated risk, and every decision required immediate judgment. She relied on training, instinct, and courage, balancing the need for speed against the necessity of safety. By the early hours of the night, had managed to get the majority of the squad to a relatively stable ledge. Everyone was soaked, bruised, and exhausted, but alive. She paused for a moment, leaning heavily against a tree, her uniform torn, her hands raw from gripping rocks and mud. She glanced at the soldiers she had saved and saw relief and gratitude in their eyes. Some, who had once mocked her, now looked at her with awe. She had earned their trust in the most extreme way possible, by saving their lives. Yet knew the night wasn't over. The storm still raged, and the mountain was far from done testing them. There were still soldiers with injuries that required attention, supplies were limited, and exposure threatened everyone's survival. She didn't have the luxury of rest or celebration. Every decision from this point onward could mean life or death. And deep down, she understood something profound. The squad had survived the first wave, but the true test, the one that would demand leadership, courage, and ingenuity, was only just beginning. Her mind raced as she assessed the situation. The ridge offered temporary safety, but it was exposed to further slides and falling debris. She began planning the next move, calculating routes, assessing who could move and who needed to be carried. Every action had to be deliberate, every step precise. The squad had gone from a routine exercise to a survival scenario, and had become the linchpin holding it all together. Without her, the chaos would likely have claimed multiple lives already. In that moment, standing amidst the howling wind and relentless rain, Carter realized the stark truth of her journey. All the teasing, all the doubt, all the underestimation, it had prepared her for this. The squad, once skeptical of her abilities, now depended entirely on her. She had stepped out of the shadows of doubt and into the center of responsibility, not by choice, but by circumstance. And as lightning cracked across the darkened sky, she whispered to herself, "I won't fail them." Storm showed no mercy. Rain fell in sheets, soaking every inch of the squad's uniforms, while wind tore through the ridge with a howl that seemed almost alive. Mud and debris continued to slide unpredictably down the mountainside. The soldiers, exhausted and battered, huddled together for warmth and shelter, their morale fraying. Staff Sergeant lay partially conscious, bleeding from a deep gash on his temple, incapable of giving coherent commands. It was clear that the natural chain of command had collapsed. The responsibility of survival now rested entirely on Sergeant Carter. Moved swiftly, scanning the squad for injuries and assessing the severity of the situation. She triaged methodically, relying on every ounce of her training as a combat medic. She addressed critical wounds first. Twisted ankle was stabilized with a makeshift splint using branches and cloth strips, while Private Jackson's head laceration was cleaned and bandaged under the pouring rain. One soldier was showing early signs of hypothermia. Layered blankets wrapped coats tightly around him and pressed him against her own body to conserve warmth. Her calm, precise voice cut through the chaos. "Miller, stay with, hold that splint tight." Private Lee monitored Jackson's bleeding. "Everyone else move higher now." The soldiers obeyed, their fear overshadowed by the clarity in his commands. Every movement she made was deliberate and controlled, a blend of instinct and practiced knowledge. Improvisation became her greatest ally. Helmet straps became tourniquets, clothing served as padding for splints, and ration packs provided warmth. His presence alone was a stabilizing force. The squad's dynamic began to shift. Soldiers who had previously mocked her followed her instructions without hesitation. Regaining partial consciousness, tried to speak but faltered, gestured sharply, signaling him to stay put. "You're in no condition to lead. Focus on breathing and stay down. We'll manage." His acknowledgement came as a nod, and though pride stung, he recognized that leadership was the only way forward. In that moment, she was no longer the underestimated rookie. She was the anchor that held the squad together. Movement was imperative. The ridge they occupied was relatively stable but surrounded by potential hazards: loose rocks above, mudslides below, and patches of treacherous, unstable ground. Began plotting a safer path, identifying the most secure sections and marking them with bright cloth scraps for reference in the darkness. "We move in groups of 2, she instructed, pairing the stronger soldiers with the weaker or injured ones. "Stay low, communicate clearly, and follow my voice." The soldiers responded with tense nods, placing their trust in the authority she now embodied. His tactical mind didn't stop at immediate survival. She recognized the importance of morale in a crisis. Huddled against the wind and rain, she spoke softly to the squad, offering reassurance alongside her directives. "You're doing great. Stay focused. Everyone's safe for now because we're moving together. Keep talking. Let's keep our heads clear." Her tone was firm yet encouraging, a delicate balance that helped soldiers overcome the terror clawing at their thoughts. By maintaining control of both physical and psychological elements, ensured that panic would not dictate the night's outcome. Improvisation became essential as she assessed the medical needs of the squad. Some soldiers were slipping into shock, trembling uncontrollably. Pulled them close, speaking quietly, monitoring breathing and keeping them warm. She stabilized fractures with branches and straps, fashioned stretchers from logs and tarps, and constantly reassessed the terrain for safety. Each decision was critical. A single misstep could spell disaster for the entire group. Yet confidence never wavered. Every movement was precise, every command delivered with clarity and authority. As night deepened, the storm grew relentless. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and the wind's force threatened to blow soldiers off their tenuous perch. Directed pairs to anchor themselves on stable rocks and trees while assisting injured comrades. She constantly rotated, checking everyone's condition and reinforcing safety measures. Her ability to multitask under extreme pressure astounded even the most experienced soldiers. Slowly but steadily, the group began to move, inching higher along a path had identified as the safest route. Amid the chaos, identified a critical obstacle, a massive mudslide forming below them, threatening to engulf anyone who hadn't yet reached higher ground. She acted without hesitation, shouting instructions, physically guiding soldiers out of harm's way, and using herself as a shield where necessary. Private Lee stumbled and grabbed him just in time, pulling him to solid footing. Every action required split-second judgment, yet she never faltered. It was as though her mind had entered a heightened state, processing danger, human frailty, and survival strategy simultaneously. Time became a blur as led the squad through the night. Mud, rain, and debris made every step treacherous, and yet she remained a steady force. She used her medical expertise to monitor the soldiers' vitals, treated injuries on the spot, and constantly adapted to the shifting terrain. Each soldier relied on her guidance, following her directions with near-religious focus. By now, the initial skepticism had vanished, replaced with respect, trust, and a growing dependence on her presence. So awareness extended beyond immediate threats. She anticipated secondary dangers, falling rocks, sudden gusts, and unstable surfaces, and adjusted the squad's movements accordingly. She maintained constant communication, calling out hazards, correcting posture, and ensuring that no one lagged behind. In doing so, she demonstrated a combination of tactical brilliance and empathy, understanding that leadership was as much about care as it was about direction. The squad was surviving because she had taken complete control. By early morning, the squad had reached a relatively secure plateau. Exhausted, soaked, and bruised, they paused briefly to catch their breath. Quickly assessed injuries again, treated hypothermia symptoms, and reinforced the need for continued vigilance. She knew this was temporary safety. The mountain was far from done testing them. Yet, for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. The squad had made it this far alive, and their survival was no longer a matter of luck. It was leadership that had kept them together. Leaning heavily against a boulder, finally spoke, his voice weak but tinged with admiration. "I underestimated you, Carter. You've kept us alive." Gave him a brief, focused nod, acknowledging his words but not dwelling on them. There was no time for ego. The mission wasn't over. The soldiers' trust had been earned, but the real test, the one that would challenge every skill she possessed, was still ahead. Standing amidst the plateau, surveyed the squad. Injuries were stabilized, soldiers were breathing, and for now they were safe. She took a deep breath, letting the cold mountain air fill her lungs, and began planning the next move. The storm had forced her to take command, and in doing so, she had transformed from the underestimated rookie into the guiding force keeping her squad alive. She knew that leadership under pressure, courage in the face of danger, and unwavering calm were the qualities that would define the rest of this ordeal. As the storm continued its assault, whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning. We're not out of danger yet, but we will survive, because I will make sure we do." The ridge, slick with rain and debris, became the stage on which courage and skill would continue to shine, a test of human endurance, leadership, and the will to survive against overwhelming odds. The soldiers, once doubtful of her, now depended entirely on her and was ready to prove, beyond any doubt, that she could carry them through the worst the mountain could throw at them. The storm did not relent. Rain pelted the rocky plateau in sheets, and wind tore through the ridge like a living predator, threatening to unbalance anyone who moved. Visibility dropped to mere feet. Darkness enveloped the mountains, making shadows indistinguishable from danger. The squad huddled together, soaked to the bone, exhausted and battered from the day's landslide and chaos. The injuries were numerous: broken limbs, deep cuts, bruises, and early signs of hypothermia in some of the younger soldiers. Fear whispered in every corner of the group. Every step, every breath carried the weight of mortality. Carter moved among them like a guardian. Her small frame belied the force of her presence. "Stay close," she instructed, her voice steady despite the pounding rain. "We stick together. No one wanders. No one panics." She checked his ankle again, adjusted splints, and wrapped his hands with spare clothing to keep warmth. Private Jackson shivered violently from hypothermia, pressed a dry coat around him, and shared her own body heat while calmly giving instructions to the others. Her voice carried authority and reassurance simultaneously, a rare balance that held the squad together when panic threatened to take over. The soldiers were terrified, and rightly so. The mountain seemed alive with malevolent energy, rocks groaning under the storm, mud slides forming below, and gusts of wind that threatened to hurl them over edges. His eyes scanned the terrain ceaselessly, calculating every risk, every possible path to safety. "We keep moving," she ordered, "but slow and careful, one step at a time. Follow my lead." Every word she spoke was calculated to reinforce clarity and calm. keeping fear from tipping the squad into chaos. Hypothermia became a silent threat as the night deepened. Trembling, teeth chattering, and some soldiers slipping into disorientation, the risk of losing consciousness loomed. Rotated through the group constantly, pressing dry cloths to faces, offering warm water from ration packs, and keeping morale alive through constant verbal reassurance. "You're doing great," she said softly. "Just keep moving, just keep talking. We're going to make it through this." Her calm persistence turned fear into trust, and trust became survival. At one point, Private Lee collapsed from exhaustion. Didn't hesitate. She knelt beside him, lifting him gently while instructing and Miller to stabilize a makeshift stretcher from logs and tarps. Using a rope from their gear, they rigged a simple support system to carry him across the slick plateau. Each movement was careful, each step deliberate. One slip could send them all tumbling into disaster. His tactical mind combined with her medical knowledge turned improvisation into life-saving precision. Every action saved time, preserved energy, and most importantly, protected lives. The storm intensified further as hours passed. Rain drummed on the makeshift shelters they created with tarps and branches. Thunder rolled through the mountains, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Fatigue gnawed at every soldier's body. Muscles cramped, lungs burned, and eyes fought against closing. Refused to allow anyone to succumb to exhaustion. She set a strict rotation. Pairs would keep watch, check footing, monitor injuries, and maintain awareness. Even the youngest and most inexperienced soldiers were now acting as integral parts of a carefully orchestrated survival team. A wolf howled in the distance, startling several soldiers. Fear flickered across their faces but remained calm. "It's just an animal," she said firmly. "Stay together, keep moving, don't let fear distract you." Her voice had become the stabilizing force of the night, the constant anchor in a chaos-filled environment. Soldiers instinctively followed her guidance, trusting her instincts over their own panic. Had transformed from the underestimated rookie into the central pillar holding them all together. Throughout the night, his mind never rested. She considered each step, each ridge, each precarious rock. She tracked the storm's progress, noted the formation of mudslides, and mentally plotted escape routes if conditions worsened. The plateau, while safer than the previous ridge, offered no guarantees. She ensured that every movement was deliberate, with attention to detail that only someone who had faced countless simulations and studied countless survival manuals could maintain. She was both tactician and medic, strategist and protector all in one. One soldier, Private Miller, began to panic, convinced they were trapped and that death was inevitable. Knelt in front of him, gripping his shoulders firmly but gently. "Listen to me," she said calmly, her green eyes meeting his. "We are not trapped. You are not alone. We move, we act, and we survive together. You trust me, right?" Miller nodded, swallowing fear, and guided him back into formation. Small victories like this became essential, each one preserving not just life, but the cohesion of the squad. Hours dragged on. Rain continued, thunder rolled, wind tore at their makeshift shelter, and the soldiers were on the brink of collapse. Two felt the fatigue clawing at her body. Her clothes were soaked through, her hands raw from gripping rocks and stabilizing injured soldiers, her muscles screaming for rest. Yet she moved relentlessly, prioritizing the needs of the squad over her own. Every second of vigilance increased their odds of survival. Exhaustion was no excuse. The mountain demanded focus and provided it. By early morning, a tenuous sense of stability emerged. The storm had slightly abated, though clouds still roiled overhead. The squad, bruised, wet, and weary, had survived the long night thanks almost entirely to his leadership. She gathered them together, quickly checking injuries, reinforcing the importance of hydration and movement, and preparing for the next stage, finding a more secure location and signaling for help. Despite the harrowing hours, the soldiers' trust in her had completely. She was no longer a rookie. They now saw her as their lifeline. As the first hints of dawn painted the peaks with pale light, looked over the squad. Faces were exhausted, uniforms torn, bodies battered, but spirits were intact. She breathed deeply, letting herself feel a small sense of accomplishment. They had survived a night that could have easily claimed lives. And yet she knew the danger was far from over. The plateau offered temporary safety, but the mountain was relentless, and further threats awaited. Mind immediately shifted to planning the next move. She whispered to herself, voice barely audible over the wind, "We made it through the night, but this isn't over, not yet." Every instinct, every calculation, every ounce of skill and courage she possessed would be required in the hours ahead. The squad depended on her entirely. Their lives, fragile and precious, rested on her shoulders, and Carter, the young medic no one had taken seriously, was ready to carry them through whatever the mountain could throw next. The first hints of morning revealed the extent of the disaster. Mudslides had carved jagged scars into the mountainside, trees were uprooted, and the storm's fury had left the plateau littered with debris. Carter surveyed her squad, exhausted, injured but alive. She had guided them through the long night, stabilized the injured and maintained order amidst chaos. Yet the mountain offered only temporary refuge. Radios were destroyed, and without communication, they were effectively stranded. Realized grimly that the only way to ensure the squad's survival was to get help, alone. She studied the map by the faint morning light, tracing routes toward the nearest ridge where signal reception might exist. Every option was fraught with danger. Unstable mudslides, slick rock faces, and sharp drop-offs threatened to turn even a single step into a fatal misstep. Yet new hesitation could cost lives. "I'm going to find help," she told the squad, her voice calm but resolute. Still weak from his injuries, tried to protest. "It's too dangerous, no one should," cut him off. "I'm the only one who can move fast enough and safely. I'll return with help, trust me." The squad nodded, some silently impressed, others clearly fearful. Checked her gear, med kit, ropes, water, and minimal rations. She slung her rifle over her shoulder, tied knots for climbing, and stepped toward the edge of the plateau. The wind was still fierce, battering her with every step, and rain-slick mud made every foothold uncertain. Descended carefully, testing each rock, gauging the stability of each slope. One slip could send her tumbling hundreds of feet. Her heart pounded, not with fear but with sharp awareness. The first obstacle came quickly. A narrow ledge along a steep rock face threatened to block her path. Inched forward, using her hands to grip jagged stone while carefully planting her feet. Below, the mountain dropped sharply, and she reminded herself to move deliberately, trusting her instincts and training. She adjusted her backpack, ensuring it didn't shift her center of gravity, and pressed on, muscles straining against the slick surface. With each careful step, she climbed, descended, and obstacles that would have frozen others in place. Halfway along the ridge, she encountered a small stream swollen by overnight rains. The water roared over rocks, ice-cold and turbulent. Assessed the crossing, testing the rocks for stability before stepping carefully across. Her boots slipped once, sending a spray of water over her, but she caught herself and pressed on. She forced herself to remain calm, methodical, and focused. Fear had no place in this moment. Only action and careful calculation could save the squad she had been entrusted to protect. As she moved further, noticed the first signs of exhaustion. Her muscles burned, her hands were raw, and her clothing was soaked through. Yet she refused to stop, knowing the squad's survival depended on her success. Every step forward was a victory. Every obstacle she navigated brought her closer to the lifeline they desperately needed. Her mind remained sharp, constantly scanning the terrain for hazards, loose rocks, hidden crevices, and weak branches that could betray her balance. The terrain worsened as she climbed. A steep, almost vertical slope loomed ahead, covered in loose rock and mud. Tied her climbing rope to a sturdy tree, testing its strength before beginning the ascent. She moved slowly, deliberately, pulling herself up hand over hand, each movement precise. The slope threatened to shift beneath her, rocks sliding perilously with every step. One miscalculation, one moment of fatigue, and she could have plunged to her death. Yet pressed on, determination outweighing pain, fear, and exhaustion. Halfway up the slope, left boot slipped on loose gravel, sending her sliding a few feet. She gritted her teeth, digging her fingers into the rock and mud to halt her fall. Heart hammering, she recalibrated her grip and continued, moving even more cautiously. The wind howled, rain pelted her, and thunder rumbled overhead. She thought of the squad below, Jackson, Miller, and the others, and felt a surge of resolve. She would not fail them, not now, not ever. Hours passed as climbed, descended, and navigated the treacherous ridges. Sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the steep cliffs and muddy ravines. She paused briefly to catch her breath, drinking water from her canteen, wiping rain from her eyes, and assessing her surroundings. Her plan was simple yet daunting: reach the higher ridge where signal might exist and transmit coordinates for rescue. Every instinct and skill she possessed was focused on this single objective. Finally, she reached a narrow plateau where trees provided minimal shelter. Knelt and attempted to use the portable radio she carried as backup. Initial attempts failed. Static and interference drowned out her signal. She tried repeatedly, repositioning herself, climbing small rocks to gain better elevation, and speaking clearly into the device. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours but refused to give up. Her voice remained steady, commands and coordinates precise, as she fought through fatigue and fear. Then finally, a faint response crackled through the static. A rescue unit had received her signal. Relief surged through, but there was no time to celebrate. She relayed the squad's location, number of injured, and status of the terrain. The operator confirmed the coordinates and promised immediate assistance. Secured the device, taking a moment to collect herself, knowing she had accomplished the first and most dangerous part of the mission, securing help for her squad. Exhausted, battered, and soaked, began the careful trek back down the ridge. Every step remained perilous, every foothold uncertain. Yet the knowledge that rescue was on the way gave her strength. She moved swiftly but deliberately, climbing over obstacles, avoiding mudslides, and navigating treacherous slopes. Each step was calculated, each decision critical. Focus never wavered. The lives of the squad depended on her returning safely. As she neared the plateau where her squad awaited, could see their figures huddled together, battered but alive. Relief washed over her, mingled with fatigue. She called out instructions, guiding them to prepare for the incoming rescue team. Soldiers who had doubted her abilities earlier now looked at her with awe, recognizing the courage, skill, and leadership that had kept them alive. Had done what none expected, and she had done it alone. By the time the first helicopter blades appeared in the distance, had the squad organized and ready. She directed the rescue team with precision, ensuring that the injured were airlifted first. Her planning and actions had maximized safety and efficiency, demonstrating not only courage but exceptional operational skill. Fully aware of what she had accomplished, nodded in respect. The squad, exhausted but alive, owed their survival to her. Carter, the rookie no one had taken seriously, had completed an impossible mission. Alone, she had navigated deadly terrain, secured rescue coordination, and returned to lead her squad to safety. Her skill, courage, and determination had transformed her from an underestimated soldier into a hero capable of extraordinary feats. And though her body ached and her mind screamed for rest, she remained vigilant, ensuring that her squad was safe, cared for, and ready for evacuation. The first rays of morning pierced the clouds, casting a pale light across the rain-soaked mountains. The storm had finally begun to retreat, leaving a landscape by mudslides, toppled trees, and shattered paths. The squad huddled on the plateau, shivering from cold and exhaustion, yet their spirits remained tethered to hope. Carter had guided them through the night and then, alone, navigated the treacherous slopes to call for help. Now, the sound of helicopter blades in the distance brought a surge of adrenaline and relief to every member of the group. His eyes scanned the horizon, spotting the rotors slicing through the sky. She shouted instructions to her squad, her voice cutting clearly over the wind and distant thunder. "Stay low, keep tight, help is coming, get ready to move." Soldiers scrambled to organize themselves, reinforcing each other as they prepared for the evacuation. Injured members were stabilized and arranged for airlift, while the rest themselves to climb onto the rescue harnesses. His presence remained the anchor, steadying the group even as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them. The helicopter drew closer, buffeting the squad with powerful gusts. Loose debris scattered across the plateau, and some soldiers faltered under the wind's force. moved swiftly, grabbing Private Lee and pulling him into a crouch, keeping him from losing balance. She barked precise, concise orders. "Stay low, anchor your feet, and wait for my signal. Move one at a time." Her voice rang with authority, every word calculated to maintain order amidst chaos. Soldiers followed her guidance instinctively. Fear was tempered by trust in her judgment. The first rescue team member descended on a rope, assessing the injuries and confirming the squad's condition. Stepped forward, providing a detailed briefing. 2 critical injuries, ankle, Jackson's head, hypothermia in 3 others. Plateau is uneven, mudslides nearby, still slick from last night's storm. The medic nodded, taking in every detail. His knowledge of her squad's exact conditions and the terrain allowed the rescue team to act quickly and safely. Her clarity and precision would ensure no life was lost during the extraction. Assisted first, supporting his weight as he climbed into the harness. Though he had once doubted her capabilities, he now relied on her completely. Directed others into the lift systematically, checking each harness, adjusting straps, and ensuring everyone was secure. The wind roared in her ears. The helicopter's blades threatened to sweep them off their feet, but remained calm and focused. Every soldier trusted her implicitly. Every movement, every instruction was executed with meticulous care. As the evacuation continued, the mountain seemed to protest, sending small landslides tumbling down nearby slopes. Rocks and mud slid dangerously close, yet kept the squad calm. "Keep low, follow my voice. One at a time," she shouted. Her ability to maintain control under extreme pressure was nothing short of extraordinary. Even the rescue team, trained for high-risk extractions, were visibly impressed by her composure and situational awareness. Had become the linchpin of the operation, ensuring that chaos did not claim any more lives. Private Jackson, weak and disoriented from hypothermia, needed extra assistance. Knelt beside him, adjusting the straps, securing his helmet, and ensuring he was safely anchored. "You're okay," she whispered. "We've got you. Just trust me." Jackson's trembling ceased slightly as he felt the reassurance in her voice. Courage was infectious. Her focus steadied those who had been terrified mere hours ago. By leading with both competence and empathy, she had instilled a resilience in her squad that would carry them through the remainder of the ordeal. The helicopter hovered over the plateau, the wind whipping violently, yet its presence ensured the operation remained orderly. Soldiers climbed into the harnesses efficiently, guided by her precise directions. When, with his injured ankle, struggled to maintain balance, physically supported him, using her strength to steady him while maintaining eye contact and verbal reassurance. Each soldier's safety was her priority, and she navigated the fine line between urgency and caution with the finesse of a seasoned commander. Finally, all squad members were secured and herself was last to ascend. She double-checked the gear, ensured no one had been left behind, and signaled the medic. The helicopter lifted smoothly and allowed herself a brief breath, though her mind remained focused on the squad's well-being. She watched the plateau shrink below, a scene of devastation and survival, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had led the squad through near-impossible conditions, faced life-threatening terrain, and brought them safely to rescue. Once aboard, coordinated with the flight crew to ensure injured soldiers received immediate attention. Medics attended to hypothermia, fractures, and lacerations, briefed them in detail about the squad's injuries and the terrain challenges they had endured. Her precise communication and first-hand knowledge expedited medical triage and ensured everyone received timely care. Now seated beside her, shook his head in awe. "Carter, I can't believe you did all that alone. We'd be gone without you." Nodded, her expression calm but satisfied. She didn't seek praise. The lives of the squad had always been her only concern. The helicopter lifted higher, moving toward the base camp where more comprehensive medical treatment awaited. Observed the mountains from above, the scars of the storm etched into the landscape. She reflected on the ordeal, the landslide, the injuries, the endless night, and the impossible terrain she had traversed alone to secure help. Each obstacle had tested her physically, mentally, and emotionally. Yet she had not faltered. Every decision, every action had been executed with precision, courage, and unyielding focus. Upon landing, the squad was guided to the medical tents for evaluation. Stayed close, ensuring that each soldier received care and comfort. The medic in charge looked at her with admiration. "You kept them alive under conditions most of us would call suicidal," he said. Nodded, her mind already shifting to aftercare, reporting, and ensuring the squad's complete recovery. She felt exhaustion gnaw at her body, but she ignored it. Her responsibility to the squad remained paramount. Finally addressed her fully, his voice heavy with gratitude and respect. "I was wrong about you, Carter. You weren't just lucky, you were extraordinary. You saved all of us." Offered a small, professional smile. "We all made it because we worked together. I just happened to see the path and make sure we followed it." Her humility masked the heroism of her actions, but those who had witnessed her leadership understood the magnitude of what she had accomplished. Later, in a debrief with commanding officers, recounted every detail. The terrain, the injuries, the storm's progression, and the improvised measures she had taken to safeguard her squad. The officers listened intently, asking questions about her decisions, her timing, and her coordination with rescue teams. Her report was precise, measured, and filled with the insight only first-hand experience could provide. By the end of the session, the consensus was clear. Carter had acted above and beyond the call of duty, demonstrating extraordinary courage, skill, and leadership under impossible conditions. As the squad recovered and the storm clouds finally dispersed, allowed herself a moment of reflection. The soldiers she had guided through terror now viewed her not as a rookie, but as a hero, a leader whose presence had made the difference between life and death. For the satisfaction wasn't in praise or recognition. It was in knowing that every soldier under her command had survived, intact and safe. She had transformed fear into trust, chaos into order, and hopelessness into survival. Carter, once underestimated and dismissed, had become the anchor, the strategist, and the guardian for her squad. Her courage, determination, and unwavering focus had earned her not just respect, but the unquestioned trust of those who had once doubted her abilities. And though she was exhausted, bruised, and wet to the bone, she knew that this mission, this night of terror and heroism, would define her career, and more importantly, the lives of the soldiers she had sworn to protect. The sun broke fully over the mountains, bathing the rain-soaked landscape in golden light. The squad, now safe and sheltered at the base camp, sat in tents, receiving medical attention, hot food, and dry clothing. The storm that had threatened to claim them all was a memory now, but the marks of its fury, bruises, cuts, mud-streaked uniforms, remained. Carter stood at the edge of the medical area, observing her squad. Her body ached from exhaustion, her muscles screamed from overuse, yet her mind was alert, watching, analyzing, and ensuring that every soldier received proper care. Commanding officers approached, their faces solemn yet appreciative. Major, a veteran officer with decades of field experience, approached first. "Sergeant Carter," he began, his voice heavy with respect, "we've received reports of your actions last night and today. We've reviewed your decisions, your leadership, and your courage. You didn't just save lives, you redefined what it means to lead under pressure." Nodded, her expression calm, professional, yet tinged with exhaustion. Praise had never been her goal. She had acted because lives depended on her, not for recognition. The squad had gathered nearby, their eyes reflecting a mixture of awe, gratitude, and relief. Jackson, Miller, and the others watched with unspoken admiration. Each of them had experienced firsthand the razor-thin margin between survival and disaster, and each knew without doubt that had been the difference. Once skeptical, some even mocking of her abilities, they now regarded her with unwavering trust and respect. They had witnessed courage, intelligence, and determination in its form. Medical personnel moved among the squad, treating injuries and ensuring hydration. Assisted where she could, reinforcing splints, distributing water, and monitoring vital signs. She worked tirelessly, despite her fatigue, driven by the same focus that had guided her through the mountains. She checked ankle, ensuring the splint was secure. She pressed a warm cloth to Jackson's forehead to reduce swelling. Her leadership extended beyond strategy. It encompassed care, empathy, and practical action, qualities that had kept her squad alive when every external factor seemed bent on ending their lives. Major called the squad to assemble for formal recognition. The soldiers, still battered and weary, stood together, forming a semicircle around. "Sergeant Carter," the major began, "your actions demonstrate extraordinary courage, ingenuity, and dedication. You acted decisively under conditions that would test even the most experienced soldiers. Your leadership saved every member of your squad. Today, we honor you for your heroism." A small hush fell over the group. Though humbled, maintained her composure, acknowledging the recognition with a brief nod rather than words. One by one, her squad members stepped forward, offering personal thanks. The one who had doubted her at first spoke first. "Carter, I don't know how to put it into words. You kept us alive when none of us had a clue what to do. You saved us all, thank you." Still favoring his ankle, added, "I thought I was done for, but you never left me behind. You made sure we all made it." Jackson, Miller, and the others echoed similar sentiments. Each voice reflected not just gratitude, but a profound recognition of heroism and leadership under the most extreme circumstances. After the ceremony, retreated to a quieter corner of the base camp. She sat on a crate, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of the last 48 hours. The adrenaline that had kept her going during the landslide, storm, and rescue mission now ebbed, replaced by exhaustion that seeped into every muscle and bone. She thought of the ridge, the treacherous slopes, the rain and mud, and the moments when disaster had loomed inches away. And yet she had acted without hesitation, guided by training, instinct, and an unwavering sense of responsibility. As she reflected, considered the lessons of the ordeal. Leadership wasn't about rank or titles. It was about presence, clarity, and the willingness to act decisively when others faltered. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite fear. And trust, once earned through action rather than words, could bind a team together in ways that theory alone never could. Had experienced all of this in concentrated, life-threatening form, and she knew she had grown immeasurably as both a soldier and a person. The squad gradually began to recover physically, but the emotional and psychological effects of the ordeal lingered. Made rounds, checking on each soldier, talking to them about their experiences, listening to their fears, and offering reassurance. She knew that leadership didn't end when the immediate danger passed. Recovery, healing, and reflection were part of the journey, and she remained as committed to her squad's well-being now as she had been on the mountainside. Later that evening, around a campfire, the squad shared stories of the ordeal. Laughter mixed with nervous energy as soldiers recounted close calls, slips, and missteps. Listened quietly, occasionally adding insight or correcting details to ensure accuracy. The camaraderie that had formed under extreme stress now blossomed in relief and shared experience. Soldiers who had once questioned her abilities now sought her opinion, guidance, and reassurance. Heroism had not only saved their lives, but also earned her a place of unshakable respect among her peers. The commanding officers returned once more, presenting with formal commendations. She received a medal recognizing her bravery and leadership. The insignia reflected her extraordinary actions, navigating deadly terrain, coordinating rescue, and saving her entire squad, yet accepted the honor quietly. For her, the true reward was not the medal or praise. It was knowing that each soldier had survived, safe and whole. She had fulfilled her responsibility, and that alone mattered. As night fell, sat by herself for a moment, looking at the stars emerging above the mountains. The storm was gone, leaving a sky washed clean, and she allowed herself to breathe fully for the first time in nearly 2 days. She thought of the mountains, the terrifying landslides, and the impossible odds she had faced. She reflected on how quickly situations could turn deadly and how decisive action could change the course of lives. Her thoughts were quiet but powerful, a mix of relief, pride, and deep respect for the resilience of her squad. This journey had begun with doubt, her abilities underestimated, her courage questioned. Yet she had risen above those expectations, transforming skepticism into trust and fear into survival. She had saved lives, led under extreme pressure, and navigated impossible challenges. And now, as the camp settled into a quiet night, Carter could finally reflect on what she had accomplished. Not only a rescue mission completed, but the affirmation that leadership, courage, and determination could indeed save lives against all odds. The squad, now safe and recovering, gathered around her one last time. They shared smiles, gratitude, and a quiet bond forged in the crucible of survival. Looked at each of them, feeling the weight of responsibility lift slightly. They were safe, alive, and stronger for having endured together. In that moment, Carter realized something profound. Heroism wasn't about recognition or medals. It was about the lives you save, the trust you earn, and the courage you display when it matters most. And she had done all of that, not for herself but for them. As the camp settled into peaceful silence, finally allowed herself to rest. The storm, the mountains, and the near-death experiences would remain etched in her memory forever, but so would the strength, resilience, and gratitude of her squad. She had faced doubt, danger, and disbelief, and emerged not just alive, but as the leader her squad had always needed. In the quiet night, under a sky washed clean of the storm, Carter's heroism shone brighter than any medal could convey.